All right. Okay, so we're going to call the first of the 2023 Facilities and Operations Committee meeting to order. So it looks like we have one agenda item,
Just one.
which is great. I think it was more than 5 slides, so I had to work on that one.
We'll go quick. Hit them all.
Front and back, they're close to 5.
Just running back, yeah. So we will start with Dan to introduce the topic today.
Okay.
Oh, I did invite PIL department to come and speak on some issues around Roosevelt as well. So I'll hand off to you.
Sounds great. So we just got the one topic tonight. And really, it's actually kind of convenient, or it was 2 topics that we had on the agenda, sort of we're combining the 2. So a few months back, we were asked to take a look into what the scope and cost would be to construct a new stadium at the Roosevelt Track and Field. We also had on our agenda for a while to do an overview of what non-bond resources and projects, how those projects can be, how they're prioritized, and how they're managed. So what we decided to do is really combine those 2 topics together, and then this is what the presentation is tonight. So we'll go through pretty quickly. Everyone should have a copy of the presentation in their packet. And I'll make one quick note. We just added a couple of notes to the presentation you'll see tonight. They're different than are in the packet. We highlighted them in orange, you get real clear, like that's the new stuff. It's just on a couple slides, so they should stick out. We thought we'd just kind of start with, hit it right on the nose. The big takeaways that we think from this presentation are, is one, overall district facility needs are pretty big, pretty broad and deep. Non-bond resources are very limited. In fact, they're generally becoming more scarce year over year. But we do have processes in place to prioritize those funds and those projects. And we'll talk about those.
Dan, for this year, what's the size of the in dollars, the size of the non-bond resources?
So new revenue was about 6 million. I think we budgeted 6, so it might end up being a little bit less than that, because with the construction excise tax, we don't know what it is beginning of the year. So that comes in throughout the year.
Was it 14 million last year?
The highest it's been in recent years, we look back, was 8.5 million. We have other funds that were carryover from last year, mostly from the sale from the Washington several years ago. Most of those will be expended this year. There will be a little bit of carryover next year.
Okay, so 6 million from the construction excise tax.
And those there's some caveats. We also have restricted funds, like grant funds that go for like the seismic grant and things like that, but we're just trying to talk more about non-restricted funds in this presentation. So real quick, categories of work, it's pretty common that when we talk about capital improvements or facility improvements, we categorize them into these 4 categories. Physical facility improvements, think of largely fixing broken things. Educational facility improvements, that's creating modern learning environments. Capacity, that's either creating new capacity for students or making changes for staff and students, or other, where some things that don't quite fit into those too well, like such as a curriculum fit into those categories. Kind of big picture, the point is the overall capital needs, they're broad. They range from projectors to seismic improvements and everything in between. And then costs. The costs we know are significant. I don't think there's any surprises here. Not everything we have good cost estimate data on, but we know in totality, physical facility improvements for the district are in the many billions of dollars, and addressing them will take decades. And that's why we have a long-term, multi-billion-dollar, multi-decade capital improvement program. So the needs are big and the resources are limited. And I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Okay. Wanted to hit on our available resources that we have for non-bond improvements. So first, there are general fund dollars that we get allocated every year, go to non-capital projects, smaller type repair projects. It's approximately $1 million a year that we get allocated out of our general fund dollars. Next is our construction excise tax funding, which is our Fund 404, which is allocated towards our capital projects. And that's roughly, like we just stated, around $5 to $6 million a year currently. And then other would be lease revenue, CV fees, grants, property sales, donations, and other. As Dan alluded, and as Dan stated before, our resources are on the decline. Lease revenue is significantly down from 2019, about $1.5 million. That goes to our Fund 445. And then our construction excise taxes revenue is down from $8.5 million down to between $5 and $6 million a year. And then I want to state that our general fund dollars, since I got in this position in 2018, has steadily declined from roughly $1.5 million per year to about $1 million a year. And then while our funding has gone down, we've seen our costs increase. And so you've got funding going down, you've got cost increases for construction projects, which I think you all are aware of, our costs increase in this environment right now. So you've just got this gap that continues to increase. Any questions?
I do. Just one question back on the categories of work. Of these categories, are they all categories that bond funds could pay for? So like a question, I'm curious just overall, and I can wait till the end of the presentation, but what of our things that we pay for with non-bond dollars that are capital costs, how much of them are items that we couldn't pay for with bonds?
All of the, if it's capital by and large, and caveats, the bond can pay for them if they're within the bond language, if they're identified in the bond, yes. And in fact, these categories of work is often where we see when we do the bond development. So it can kind of help us target our conversations if we're talking about physical facility versus capacity or something.
I think the language that we get from bond council is capable of being capitalized.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking the question is a natural thing is like, okay, if they could be paid for with a bond and we have a large bond, is that they just didn't make the cut or they're just unexpected?
It's because we have a prioritization process for bond projects. So even we have like many more eligible needs than we have bond resources for.
Yeah, I guess just want to make sure I'm clear that those aren't, most of these projects that we use non-bond dollars for could actually be paid for with the bond.
I think the other way to say it is they would be capitalizable, therefore they would be eligible for bond dollars. That doesn't mean necessarily we could pay for them with existing bonds. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I want.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's like, are they in a category that we could, even if we wanted to pay for them?
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, okay, I think, yeah, finally. And actually, this is,
Yeah,
nice segue.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So scope. Of course, our bond scope is the bigger projects, the modernization projects, the large capital improvement projects, roofing, HVAC. So our non-bond scope is really anything else that we need to fill the gap that the bond's not addressing. And I wanted to highlight a few kind of different projects that we see consistently, we're seeing over and over. One of them is plumbing projects, like sewer breaks. We're seeing a lot of sewer failures. So it's not very sexy, but it's stuff we have to address. I mean, it's critical. We've seen, for instance, a recent sewer failure underneath the kitchen over at Rose City Park that happened a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Well, we had stopped the kitchen service. For 2 months, it was out of service. Well, we excavated down and repaired the sewer pipe, the sewer line. A lot of these existing sewer lines to our schools, which are 75, 80 years old, made of clay tile. And those are susceptible to damage from building settlement, roots from trees. Another area is we're seeing our asphalt fail. So not only our parking lot, but our asphalt play areas. So over time, you'll see alligatoring asphalt. Water gets in those cracks, and then it just becomes a really bad problem really quick, which creates tripping hazards for the kids playing around the playgrounds. So that's all over the place. And to replace asphalt, it can trigger a whole lot of other upgrades that get really expensive really fast. And so it sounds pretty small to go patch an asphalt area, but it can trigger a lot of other projects.
So I'm just want you to be clear. So when you talk about things like asphalt, like playgrounds and things, but those can be capitalized, so therefore bond funds could
They could be
potentially
capitalized, right?
pay for those, right?
That's correct. If it's in the bond language, if,
Right,
right.
okay.
The bond language is so broad that, just the way it was written well, it usually is written, is although there is a much more specific conversation at the board level, and maybe in even like what gets sent out to voters, that the actual legal language is usually really broad.
I would say it's broad but not limitless, right? I mean, it does have,
Boundaries.
yes, it's meant to give flexibility in those identified areas. We look at it, we look at the exact language every time there's a question, so.
And that's why I wanted to make sure I was clear on that capitalization piece, because, you know, I'm looking at it, okay, if it's going to be capitalized and we could potentially use bond funds for, like, for instance, we talk about PD, well, that's not a capitalization project, so I'm looking at that necessarily wouldn't be in the bond realm, right? So that's why I was just asking that question. Okay.
An example of an asphalt project that was pretty stunning was the Reiki parking lot that we did. So the asphalt over there was pretty bad. So we're like, okay, we're gonna allocate a couple of $100,000 to go resurface part of the asphalt. Not all of it's too much for us to afford. So we get into the project and it triggers, the permitting process triggers all these other upgrades. We ended up spending $700,000 on the asphalt.
Yeah.
You know, major stormwater basin that we had to put in, a covered trash enclosure. It just goes on and on, but I'll keep moving. Emergency projects. We have to have the flexibility in funding available to address emergency projects that occur during the year. Playgrounds. It might sound not trivial, but I can't think of it compared to the other projects we're trying to address. But playgrounds are seen by all the community. You know, you drive by our playgrounds, and if you see a playground that just looks awful, it of course reflects pretty bad on us. Plus, it's a safety issue. We have a lot of playgrounds that are old that need repair, and not only our school kids are playing on these playgrounds, but you know, kids in the surrounding community that might not go to that school use the playgrounds. So we try to emphasize playgrounds a whole lot and prioritize those. And then last is our non-capital repairs type projects. These are your smaller type repair work that we're constantly doing throughout the year. We've got to use our general fund dollars to do that. Some examples of that would be repairing, you know, access control devices, which are card readers on the outside of our buildings. Those are constantly breaking or being vandalized. So we've got to go repair those. We go into classrooms and repair, you know, outlets that get damaged, or a teacher wants to move from a classroom into another room, and they want to convert to an office. Well, we got to run power and data for a computer and whatever else is needed. We're constantly doing that. Any questions on that slide? And then I listed some of our projects that we're doing. So non-capital projects, which are again have to be paid for out of our general fund dollars. Just a few wanted to highlight. Name changes get paid for out of our general fund dollars. Ida Wells, recent sidewalk repairs.
Just a question.
Yeah.
It says non-capital project, it's a capital project, but it's not paid with bond dollars. Is that what that headline means?
No, so smaller than, you can think of it as smaller than $20,000 type project. So anything under $20,000 that's not capitalizable, meaning it doesn't improve the asset value.
That will return.
Yeah.
Return on investment, so.
So they're facility related projects.
Yep,
But not paid for.
not capital.
But like, you could pay for the crack sidewalk at Jefferson with bond dollars, or?
So that project cost to repair that sidewalk is probably in the $10,000 range. If we wanted to replace the entire sidewalk around the entire campus, that seems, you know, more appropriate to be a
Hopefully we
capital.
will be paying for that with the bond.
Yeah.
We can't pay for ordinary maintenance repair with capital dollars. And there isn't like necessarily a hard threshold that has
Yeah.
different definitions. We sometimes use dollar thresholds just to operationalize. We're not asking the question several hundred times a year if I can capitalize this, smaller project or not. Sometimes we do, but it's really about the definitions of what is capitalizable and what's not. But ordinary maintenance repair is not capitalizable.
But now the ordinary maintenance repairs that we do, are they done in-house or are those stuff we hire out to do?
So everything in our department, my department, is contracted out. Maintenance side of the house, that's where we have our own personnel that can do some of this work, and they definitely do a lot of these repair type projects. On the capital side, just a few projects I want to highlight. We replaced the Roosevelt Track and Field this summer with new. That was a great project. A current project right now is to replace rotting window sills and jambs at Creston. And then last summer, we did the Holyrood campus where it was overflow for grant students. We converted that into grant student use. And then something we do every year would be converting the fluorescent lights to LED lights as part of energy and sustainability projects.
So you mentioned the field, the track and field
Yeah.
for Roosevelt. So that's a capital project. It's capitalizable, right? So I have two questions. So that could have actually been paid out of the bond, right? And two,
Maybe.
well, it was capitalizable, right?
It's
Whether,
maintenance though.
It could be paid out for a future bond for sure. So if that was identified in a future bond as a capital improvement, yeah.
I guess I'm just going by the.
That was the point I was going to make, Dan, which is, we should be clear if we're talking about our present bond or if we're talking about, potentially eligible for a future bond.
Right, but I'm looking at from the definition I just heard for capable of being capitalized, right? You're going to get a return on your investment on that, right? So I'm just wondering, would that could have that fallen under the boundary of the bond piece? So instead of using, the general fund stuff that we use, could we have, whether we did it or not, could we have used the bond funds for that?
Maybe, but there's a difference between what's capitalizable or capital cost and what is bond compensable. So there are these different tests. So for something to be bond compensable, paid for by the bond, we have to make a determination that's bond compensable. Largely, is it within that bond language? The bond calls out certain scopes of work very clearly. These funds are for this work. Therefore, there are a lot of questions where that's capitalizable or not. We don't have to go to the attorneys and answer those questions. If there's something that's a gray area, we would go to our bond counsel to see if legally we could do it. But that would be just one of many hurdles if we wanted to look to add scope to a bond that's already passed that wasn't considered when the bond was developed and brought to voters and communities. Is that the funds would have to come from somewhere within an existing bond. So I think there's multiple hurdles. I'm not saying no,
Right.
but that would be a process. Then there'd have to be a number of decisions made.
And I'm not familiar with the Roosevelt piece, so that wouldn't have been in the modernization package like Grant was with their fields, Lincoln
That
with their
scope was
field.
not in the 2012 bond Roosevelt.
And part of it is the community had fairly recently paid for the installation of.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't, it has like a 10-year.
It was fairly
or so.
new at that
It was fairly new in 2012.
Yeah, so the life of the,
Suffice to say, Director Holland, looking back,
Amy, I'm sorry. Marshall was speaking at the same time. Sorry.
so the life of the turf when we did the building was halfway of the turf and the track. So when we tried to get in, it was like, but why would you replace the track and the turf? It has 5 more years in it, right? So when they did the scope, it was not in the scope. So after the fact, 5 years later, when we wanted to have it done, it wasn't eligible because it wasn't in the scope at the time they did it.
Okay.
Not that I agree with it then,
Right,
because
right,
obviously,
right.
I probably didn't, right, but I will.
So I'm just making sure I understand. So it wasn't in the scope, but going by the definition, what did you guys have as far as capable of being capitalized and being bond compensable, it could have fallen in that broader scope when, especially when you talk about modernization anyway, right, of a school. It could have, potentially it could have fallen in that.
It certainly could have fallen in the scope of the 2012 bond
Okay,
that talked about specifically modernizing Roosevelt.
okay,
It just wasn't, yeah.
gotcha.
So here,
I mean, this is like the conversation we had about Lincoln's lack of athletic infrastructure, that the reason there was a refusal to even build out swing space during construction was because it was not specifically identified in the scope of work for the project. So those student athletes didn't really have a place to hang their hat. Same thing.
when they rebuilt Lincoln, the track and the field was in the scope of work because it needed to be replaced because they were flipping the whole building. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But now when we talk about a school like Jeff, which there's not getting flipped, but that those things are included, like the grandstands and the master plan and all that stuff. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on how all that stuff works, that's all. As far as from, I think Roosevelt was one of the first schools, and then, of course.
Roosevelt paid for a lot of it on their own. Let's just be clear.
No, I'm just saying as far as the first year, I mean, the first school that I've done, to now we're at number 8, yeah, lessons learned type of deal. So I'm just trying to just wrap my head around that whole piece. Okay.
Any questions on that slide with the projects? And then we just gave some examples of some recent projects that we've done. Applegate window replacement, windows, again, I reiterate that they need our attention. We're
And
trying
I
to
see
address-
that, I think, let's go back, I'm just curious. Was it just those windows?
It was just those windows, yes, that bank of windows.
We had 21 windows and it cost us $146,000.
Let me revise that. I think it was more than that.
Okay,
Okay, yeah.
okay.
I think it was.
Cause
I'm in the
my
wrong
contractor had just
Yeah.
came in and was like,
Yeah.
hold on,
No.
we put 21 windows, right? I'm
Right.
like, but
And
okay,
then-
so it was more than that, okay.
It was more than that.
Gotcha.
Something came up. Something came up.
Flooring at Woodlawn in the auditorium.
Yeah.
Looks a lot better. Vestal play court looks a whole lot better. And then the siding at Dream Thumb Portable looks a lot better as well. And then, of course, the Roosevelt track and field replacement. So next,
Question like this capital project of replacing copper siding with metal due to theft at Lent, wouldn't that be something like our insurance would cover?
well, because the copper siding's getting stolen, is that what you're thinking?
I mean-
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You have $1 million deductible,
Pardon?
you have $1 million self-insured retention.
So that's a lot of copper they need to steal, I guess. I don't know if we've got that much, but it was just an ongoing problem. It was amazing. So we just decided, okay, we're gonna have to take all the copper off and replace with painted metal. It just,
That's a lot of.
It's an insured loss, but often these types don't meet that retention threshold.
management of how we manage our facility improvement projects. So our projects are generated from multiple sources. So when we start our project planning for the year, which starts basically now, we already know kind of what we're going to be doing next year to some extent. We'll start with the FCA, the Facilities Condition Assessment information. Throughout the year, we get work orders generated on the maintenance side of the house, which some of those, if the maintenance folks are in-house personnel, can't tackle because it's too big or too complex, that comes over to our group, which is contracted out. And then project development requests, which is our main vehicle that we get submitted from school sites, facilities operations managers, et cetera, average 300-400 a year. Of course, our emergency declaration projects and initiatives and supports like the Southeast Guiding Coalition work. And then other, I want to just state that
we do a lot of volunteer projects. So we work with PTAs in our schools. Sometimes the PTA has funding to contribute, and then we might be able to match on whatever project they want to do at their school. Sometimes they don't have any funding, but we'll at least assign a project manager to work with that group, make sure that volunteer project meets our requirements, and so forth. So it's a great chance for us to build goodwill in the school. So far, I think.
Last year, just speaking of volunteer projects, one of the huge disparities that sort of came out during the pandemic and then just naturally, because we're in Oregon, was those like elementary schools that have a covered playground and those that didn't.
Yep.
Is there some sort of broader prioritization or is that something that it's not just a playground, but it's like actually having it be usable? I mean, it was so striking during the pandemic of like the difference.
Yeah. It's on our list as far as projects to start installing these things. They're not cheap to install. They're around $400,000 to $600,000. So, you know, we want to do more of them. But our group, with our funding, can only do so much of those. So maybe one a year. We're looking at the next site to get one. You know, maybe that's something for a future bond to help out on. Those are important, definitely, and it made reared its head during the pandemic for sure. So just some facts about our department. We average 225 to 300 projects a year. We currently have 260 active projects. We have 7 project managers. Average PM's got 30 to 35 projects going at any time. Average cost of our projects approximately $65,000.
Okay, hold on. Just, can you go back to that? Mm-hmm. So we have a $6 million budget, right? And you said the average cost of $65,000.
Mm-hmm.
That only brings us around 92 projects a year, but you guys are saying you do.
Yeah.
No, no, just because my math is.
Yeah, no. Basically, I tallied up all of our active projects, which include, you know, general fund dollars, which that's not part of the $5 or $6 million we're talking about.
So you're talking about an additional pot of money that's.
That's the $1 million.
Yeah,
So
so
we're looking at $7 million with about $1 million coming from general fund.
roughly.
Okay.
So this just helps illustrate that $65,000 a project. So that helps illustrate if we have a big capital project that we want to do, how many projects is that taken away from? Roughly. Right?
I kind of see where you're coming from. I guess it's in my mind with the math piece. If you're saying, well, you know, if we're doing 300 projects at an average of 65,000 a project, that math is over $7 million. So I guess when you say you're trying to say you put it in perspective, is a lot of those projects way less than $65,000?
Yes.
That you're. So what big project is coming in is making that average be 65,000? Like what costs?
Let's say the Roosevelt Field and Track at $1.3 million. That's what the, you know.
So let's take that as
Yeah.
an example. So if you did that at $1.5 million, you know, well, now you only have $5.5 million left, right? Well, even you're still not going to hit that 225 to 300 projects. The math just doesn't add up.
After this meeting, how about I send you kind of how I came up with that?
Okay.
Would that help?
Yeah, that definitely would help.
Okay.
There's a spreadsheet involved.
Yeah, there is. And hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah.
How do we prioritize? We've got a process. So first we categorize the type of project, which is that left-hand box. And then what's the priority level? What's the urgency level of the project? 1 through 4. And then is it an equity site? Yes or no? And then I've listed some example projects below on kind of how we categorize and prioritize the projects. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it.
So now out of this model, which ones are done by our maintenance folks and which ones are we contracting out?
These are all projects that we contract out.
So to replace the signage here at, I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's here.
That's here.
We would contract that out instead of having our own maintenance folks do
Yeah,
that?
we don't have we need a sign company to do that manufacturing of the sign and installation. That's the sign out front, it's that monument sign out front. And then the letters on the building. We have to use a contractor for that. Yeah. It'd be great if we could do it in-house, but we're not set up for it. I mean,
Okay.
plus, I bet maintenance would say, you know what, we've got so many higher priority projects right now, please contract that out. Right?
Gotcha.
Processes. Our annual project planning process, which kind of starts right now, of course, try to align our projects with our available resources. It's a constant balancing act. Once we kind of know what we want to tackle, we'll share that with OSP, PIL, FOMS, et cetera. Try to get any feedback and coordinate with them because they might have some projects in mind that we're not aware of. And then throughout the year, we could have the best plan available starting, at the fiscal year in June. Come July, August, September, all of a sudden these projects we didn't know about, like emergency projects happen or other things happen that we need to adjust. So, that might delay some projects we wanted to tackle. I guess a good example would be Markham School. We wanted to replace all the windows at Markham School, but other projects came up that had to be prioritized, so we delayed that to start this coming summer.
So
Any
Patrick,
questions on that?
Patrick or Dan, so why are we having this presentation now? Is this just purely informational, or are you looking for some feedback as you guys head into your budget prioritization process?
Good segue. So what we've been wanting to, at some point in time, was just kind of on our list of to talk about how non-bond resources are prioritized and carried out. We were asked just several months ago to take a look at what it would take scope-wise and cost-wise to build a new stadium at Roosevelt and replace what's there and add addition. That is, athletics outside modernizations is not specifically called out in the bond. So it would likely require the use of non-bond capital resources to do that. So we wanted to give context around what are available non-bond capital priorities, what the type of projects are, and what resources are available, and then talk specifically about Roosevelt Grandstand Stadium, and then those similar type of projects that we get requests about pretty regular for large capital projects. Does that answer your question, Amy?
So I'm understanding. So when I look at this here for the Roosevelt grandstands, and I look at the umbrella of capable of being capitalized, this would fit in that because it's going to add value to the existing building that we have. So we're looking to increase our ROI based on doing something like this, right? So that potentially could fall under the capable of being capitalized and being bond compensable because of that, because of the outcome that we would get from it.
I don't think there's any question that it's a capital project. We could use capital funds to do it. Could we use existing bond funds? That's a question. Could it be placed in a future bond explicitly? I don't think there's any question with that.
No, well, yeah, I get doing it in a new bond. I'm just looking at, as we look at the bond funds that we currently have, potentially that could fall under that. Is this what I'm saying? Potentially it could fall under that. Second thing, as far as with the Roosevelt stuff, and this is what I asked Marshall to come in and talk about, is the stands inside the gym. And
The
it was,
bleachers in the gym?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And it was surprising me when going to a game and only half of the bleachers was out. And I was like, well, maybe it's because there ain't nobody coming to the game. I just didn't know. But then found out that it's because if you expend it all the way out, it goes into
Play area.
Play area.
Basketball area.
Right, so, yeah, it's weird. But I didn't, like I said, I just, anyway, so with something like that and I'm gonna have Marshall, because that's what I asked about the stuff, so I'm gonna let him explain that for me here, so I can kind of get an understanding, and then as well as this piece, look at how do we fix that? Because that, I guess my thinking was, wouldn't that be under the modernization piece of the bond initially?
Yeah.
And how did that happen? Like, that seems like that's some kind of engineering faux pas that that happened. Like I said,
I have food comments on that, but I'll let.
Well, I hate to follow food laws. That's not a good thing in a meeting. Well, a two-part question. So part one, the gym, just for record, yes, there was a FUPA, the facility was built, engineered with the thought that the gym, when the bleachers open, was to house the entire student body, not be functional for athletics. On one hand, you think that's the same thing. Clearly, I think it was a FUPA, but when it was explained to me, it made sense. That has never happened again because we were aware, we made sure that that was delineated in any discussion, make sure that doesn't happen again.
Marshall, what's the capacity of the Roosevelt Gym?
The capacity is 1,700 when the bleachers all the way out for the student body,
For an assembly, but what's the capacity for a game?
probably 800.
Okay.
That's one of those pauses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an
Like
awkward
800.
pause. Yeah.
When I asked, I think it was Michelle, Patrick, is that right?
Yeah.
When I asked Michelle, I was kind of told that there was really no way to fix it because the space is where the space is, right? So I guess technically you could try to, not my area, but make the bleachers be steeper to try to get more, but there's no more space because you have the auxiliary gym to the south. And if you went farther back, you would eliminate the auxiliary gym. And then to the north is a hallway, that's the hallway that separates the outside to the inside of things. That pretty similar to that.
Classrooms. There are classrooms on the other side. That's where the CTE workspaces are on the other side of that. The whole building was supposed to be shifted over 20 feet. And then the parking lot, the driveway go around was supposed to go in by that far. And then the grandstand area that you're looking at the back was supposed to be, all of that was supposed to be redone. And when we sat in the DAG and we talked about it, they said, yes, yes, yes. And then when it came down to the brass tacks of actually starting the work, they went back to the second plan, which had the gym back where it was. The Roosevelt Gym by far is smaller than what it was. If we go back and we look at our drawings from the DAG when we were doing it, if we look at the drawings from, it's either drawing 3 or drawing 4, you'll see that it's extended over. When you come back to the other one, the only way to get it was to move the building. They said that there was going to be a problem with the driveway, the cars being able to get through and creating the lane for the cars to get through to go around, because they knew at that time they were going to be doing work on the other side where the tennis courts are at now. The old shop used to be. That was a completely different building. And they knew that they wanted to be able to drive through and have that be a full drive around. And so, yeah, and so that's where we lost it. And so the idea, I'm not that type of engineer, so I won't speak to what can be done with bleachers, but I can tell you that the problem is that the building is shorter by 20 to 25 feet.
so I understand, hold on. So I understand, so if 1,500 of our students, who we're all here for, to do this stuff for, wanted to go watch a game,
They ain't
they
figuring
will
that
not
out.
be able to do that.
That never.
That's correct.
Never. It's not going to happen. It is out of the question.
Okay. Go ahead.
So that was question A.
Yeah.
Right? And so part of section A for me is we did learn a lot, unfortunately a lot at Roosevelt around the involvement of athletics in projects to try to make sure those things didn't happen. Because that's not our area expertise. There have been other things that we wish were different. Part of that was we did go to some meetings that we should have been at. Part of that is the DAG made some decisions that we thought were one way and they end up being another. And so I think as we move forward, I know it's gotten better because we have no other shorter gyms. We have no other place where the bleachers don't come out. But there are some still things we wish were better. And the last part of that is, I think there was a comment earlier you made, Gary, about when bonds are out, athletics has not been a priority. And then we come back and we try to fix it on the backside. And that clearly doesn't work, right? So somehow, and we try to, we are on the front side of that now, where we haven't been on in the past.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. You know, everybody know where I stand on that, but I'm looking at it from capitalization viewpoint. You know, since I love that definition. You know, that's a great definition. And so I'm looking at how do we focus on our students, because if we're staying children youth centered with our decisions, right? Even if we do mess up something or something happens, because it is for our students, then I think it would be a sense of urgency to rectify that. However, we need to rectify that. That's just my thought, you know. But we can move on to the grandstand, because I don't know about the grandstand stuff either.
So what I would say, Gary, is there, to my knowledge, there's only two ways to rectify it. We're not gonna add 25 feet to the building. That's why, well, I wanted to say that. I'd say perhaps look at one side of the bleachers and figure out how to restructure it. So there are lots of gyms that have less than 1,800 capacity, right? Because most of our gyms before they were new didn't have that capacity. So we could function without that. The second part was the grandstands, right? And again, in the original scope, that was not a part of the DAG, to my knowledge. And it was kind of like, well, when you come back to do the turf and the track, that's when you should have the conversation of possibly being in an additional bond, right? That got missed. No one's fault. It got missed to come back to when we moved to other bonds. As a matter of fact, that's not true. That was in the bond, original bond of 635 or 640, 650 million, and athletics had 35 million, and it was valued. So somehow it got taken out. I was my own bet. So it was in there originally to correct that in our numbers in the 35 million. When athletics lost that, then it became, how are we going to go fix that? It is a problem because we have over 1,400 kids at Roosevelt. The current bleachers seat 8. The seating across the way is, I think, 1 or 2 small baseball, softball kind of temporary seating. We have people that are along the fence line setting. They're sitting in chairs. People are, your perspective of your school, sometimes your athletic facilities are what you see. It's kind of like your curb appeal. So when people come from our district and outside, they're like, oh, look at this great building. And then they go there and go, wow, what happened here? If we want to make sure that our kids have access to come to games and be treated like other students from other schools, including ours, it is something that we believe that should be prioritized to be adjusted, whether that's more on one side and we get everybody on one side, or where we add some to the other side, but somehow we shouldn't have a facility where both inside you don't have capacity and then outside you have capacity.
So a question, thanks for that. So when I look at like our other schools like Grant and Lincoln, I think Franklin got redone, I know Benson's getting done. Will that issue be there as well, to where if they were watching a game and they couldn't have 1,000 or 1,500 people there, or have that been rectified at those schools?
I don't know offhand, not Marshall, you know offhand, yeah.
So all of our outside, new stadiums are being built between 17 and 2,000 seats.
Exactly. It's actually being built for, yeah, it's being
Brand
built
is
for.
not one that we consider that because we don't have a stadium.
Yeah.
They use Marshall, and Marshall has that capacity.
And an indoor for the gym, for the indoor one for the.
Yes, that's been addressed as well.
So I look at this a couple ways. One, I look at it as an equity issue, and it is what it is, right? If we have schools that house that all of the kids will be able to participate in those activities, I think perception-wise, when you look at Roosevelt and where Roosevelt comes from, perception-wise, they could be like, well, how come we didn't get the same thing of our other schools in our district got? And two, I think I keep going back to the children's center piece, right? If we want our kids to be fully engaged in their school, they should have the space to be engaged with, right? And whether it's the volleyball team or whether it's a state playoff game or what have you, they miss out on that, and so, I'm just thinking like and I'm looking at the capitalization piece, right? Capitalization wise in our ROI of doing a grandstand it'd be great for the asset piece of the district. It is what it is, right? And so, I'll say something else after, but you have any comments on that?
Which piece of it?
Any of it?
Well, I was just looking at the old package and I don't see athletics anywhere in here. In any of the packages from option 1A, 1B, there's like 6 options. This is, I think, from right before we made the referral.
Well, hold on.
But
Hold on, I'm gonna try to guide the conversation. I don't
Tell me
want
what you want.
to, I don't want to talk about it as an athletic piece. I want to talk about it as a capitalization piece. And an equity piece as far as our kids being able to access the facilities that we're building.
So, starting in 2001, I participated in the Great Fields project, which was making sure that all the students had a high quality track and field, because it was clear that if we just left it to the community that could fundraise, that we probably would have 3 schools with that. So, and all along, I believed it's the district's responsibility, not a school community's responsibility to pay for the facilities. We all pay taxes, bond referrals, so I'm very supportive of all the high schools having equitable athletic facilities, not just for school communities that can pay for it, and using the bond as a way to structure that. I also think there's a piece around playgrounds. I don't want to miss that because also lots of school communities that can afford to raise money to pay for playgrounds pay for it, and they have nicer playgrounds than the school communities generally that can't, just because we haven't had the resources. So I think we should have just like whether it's classrooms or if we're making an investment in one set of schools, that it should be equitable across the board. So.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I was just going to add like an asterisk is that at Grant and Benson, we just have some unique challenges. So because the athletic facilities, the exterior athletic facilities are been owned by the city, but I think those are conversations that we need to stop kicking the can down the road and really, the city's not going to be using Benson as a city park. So why would it be? We should try and accelerate those conversations. Same thing with the grant.
We're in those conversations right now.
All right, so, and I was gonna ask you next, based on the conversation that you heard, what's your thoughts? And I want you to structure it, your thoughts around the equity piece and, capitalization and not just athletics.
You're muted.
Thanks, Herman. I don't really understand the context in which we are having this conversation. There's quite a few things that we didn't get quite right with our bond projects the first time around, and there are a lot of inequities with athletic resources all across the district. So I would like to have a better understanding of the context that we're having this conversation in and what budget we're potentially talking about. I mean, if the question on the table is whether we're looking at making a direct recommendation for a $4 million project for Roosevelt Athletics out of a $6 million discretionary fund for non-bond funded capital improvements, no, I'm not ready to make that recommendation in the absence of looking at the whole universe. So I'm still just, I don't disagree with the need at all, but it's just not clear to me, you know, where this conversation sits and even what budget we're talking about.
Sure. So I try to make it clear. I guess one of the things I'm trying to accomplish in this conversation is when we look at the inequity of the school and how we can rectify that. And two is how do we rectify that in the scope of it being capable to be capitalized and bond compensable. So in short is how can we rectify this? And we need to ask the question if we can use bond funds to do it with.
Well, if we're talking about development of our 2024 bond project, bond package, which really isn't very far away, we need to start that work, you know, within the next 6 months, then I'm 100% in. And as Marshall knows, and Gary, as you know, athletics is long overdue for earmarks in our next bond project. And I will fight for that mightily. And I regret having not been, more of an advocate for athletics in our other bond projects. So if that's what we're talking about, then all day long.
So I think that's one aspect. I think too, I'm looking for also to see if we can do that with current bond funding that we currently have now.
Yeah, given close scrutiny of our bond program at this time, I don't see any. I mean, that would have to be a process where we would evaluate, all the value engineering decisions and all the, other issues that have arisen and look at them all together. And it's not even going to end up to be a very big pot of money from that discretionary fund. And then also, we've got all of our smaller projects that are health and safety projects and accessibility projects that fall into that too. So I honestly am not very optimistic about finding a way to do that in our current bond program, but I'm very enthusiastic about making a commitment to do it in our 2024 bond program.
Thanks.
Okay, so I am from an equity perspective. The way that this has been done for Roosevelt as compared to every other school within the district that has had work is done, Roosevelt has gotten trash. It is what it is. The bleachers that are there currently aren't even bleachers that were supposed to be used for the football field. These were bleachers that were supposed to be used for the baseball or softball field that were over there that the community paid for, not the district, the community paid for, and then they brought those over as a placeholder, which is why they don't go all the way over the stadium. They were simply a placeholder until we were able to get the funding for the bleachers that were actually supposed to go there and extend all the way over. The building that is over, you can't even go in. If we want to talk about the children, if we want to keep kids first, that building is a safety hazard. And so that's why it's locked under bolt and key, and only an athletic director or someone from staff who is insured by the district is allowed to go in the space, and they don't want more than 2 people in that space bringing out equipment at any one time period, because it's a cinder block building that is falling down. So so if we're talking about equity and why should we be looking at this and why should we be thinking about this? Roosevelt has gotten the crappy end of the stick every single time. When we played Jeff, and Jeff came over, Jeff is like the Roosevelt Jeff, that's like a community love rival. We've been doing this thing for like 50 years. And most of the people that say they rivals now, like the kids that say they rivals, they don't even understand that this rivalry actually came from, we played together in the park or on the fields. And, you know what I'm saying, now we were on different teams, and now I'm not finna let you. So it was a love rivalry, and it has been such. And when we go to our games, Marshall's been to them, we have barbecues, like, you know what I'm saying, on the back lawn over there. We're cooking. People aren't coming in at Jeff on that side. But when you come to Roosevelt, we can't tell the people don't get on the field because there's nowhere else for them to go. So they have to be on the track. If they come to the school, they literally cannot sit in the stands. They have to be on the track. There's nowhere else for them to go. So when we had the game, people brought their own lawn chairs and they sat them around the track, going all the way around on both sides. So if we're talking about equity, no other school is going to have to do that. And if we're talking about safety, then if something were to happen and we need to bring the ambulance in and they got to come through the gate and they got to do all of that, we also now have to get 100 to 200 people to part like the Red Sea so that this ambulance can come through, because there's no other way. And if I'm lying, Marshall, please correct me, because I know he's been out there. And so when we do have these, there's nowhere. So from a safety perspective, it's unsafe to have any more than what can actually fit on the bleachers. The bleachers that are on the far side, the ones that Marshall brought up, those far side bleachers, those were the old what is it, like when you're playing baseball and you got the little bleacher that's behind the thing for like the players or whatever it is, like the
Dugout.
the little dugout bleachers. You got those little bitty bleachers. That's what those were. We essentially used the stuff because we were redoing the baseball field. We reused the bleachers and stuff that was going to go to that. Those are the old ones, and that's why they went to the far side. The new ones that were supposed to be there became the game bleachers. We didn't, as a district, give Roosevelt crap. We didn't give them anything. So now when we're saying, okay, hey, we want a stadium. There was a stadium in the bond and the DAG when we were talking about it. It got value added out. Oh, y'all don't need that. Why is it that Roosevelt is constantly being told, oh, y'all don't need that? Oh, you'll get it later, or we'll come back to it. I'm tired of Roosevelt being told, just take what we're going to give you, eat this and shut up, or you may not get anything else later. And so Roosevelt has been like, we'll eat it, you know what I'm saying, because we don't want you to take away the little bit that you have given us. But at this point, I'm not going to shut up. We've done Roosevelt dirty. We know we've done them dirty. When we look at, show me where you spent the money. Show me where the money is, and then I'll show you what you care about. And you can tell, you know what I'm saying, by what you're spending on. It's just not there. So we can't keep saying that we want to talk about equity and then we treat Roosevelt like trash. We can't keep saying that we want to talk about safety, and then we're not concerned about the people who go get ran over when the ambulance has to come through because there's nowhere else for them to go. We can't, or if something happens and they all have to run out, somebody's going to get trampled because everybody is on the field and there's nowhere for anybody else to go. There's the small little gate exits on the one side when you come in. If everybody's trying to get out that exit, that's a hot mess. It's not really going to happen. And so, I mean, from the get-go, Roosevelt we need to do better. So yeah, I think we can do it now. I think we should do it now. And I don't think we need to wait. Roosevelt has been waiting. They've been waiting. Is there any other school in our district that has a stadium that looks worse than Roosevelt's? I'll wait.
Grant doesn't have a stadium.
They only have a stadium.
They got a bowl.
So we're talking about schools that actually have a stadium that we can compare to. If we're saying, so Grant doesn't have a stadium, build them one. Is it gonna look like Roosevelt's? Who in here wants to be, what the lady, what was that lady's name? She did the Green Eyes thing. When she said, who in here would like to be treated the same way African Americans are treated in your city? Stand up. And then nobody stood up. It was a room full of white people. They said, no, maybe you didn't understand the question. Who in here would like to be treated the same way that African Americans are within our city? Please stand up. And then nobody stands up. What other school in the district wants to be treated the same way that Roosevelt is being treated? Please stand up. What other school in the district wants to have a stadium the same way that Roosevelt stadiums look right now so that they can be proud of it? Please stand up. If we know that it's trash, then let's call it trash and let's do something about it. So, and that's going to be the thing I stand up on. We talking about the bleachers. They can't go all the way out because of, the capacity. I know that's going to be a hard battle to fight, but they can't even go all the way in right now. So if we wanted to rent out if Roosevelt wanted to rent out the facility and say we're going to do split the gym down the middle so that we can have a game going on floor 1, a game going on floor 2, and a game going on the auxiliary gym, it's not going to happen because the bleachers that are on the south side are cockeyed. And they won't go all the way back in. Now, that's a track issue, I'm sure, that something is off track, but it's been off track for like 6 months now, and it ain't got back on. So, it's the little stuff. Roosevelt is consistently being screwed. And then they're told you'll be fine. You like this. This is domestic violence at its finest. I love you. I love you. Come on, we got to do better. So, equity, safety, whatever you want to call it, Roosevelt is being robbed. That's my thoughts on it.
All right, any other thoughts? Okay, so I want to ask.
So I guess I do have a question for that. So when the board was structuring how the bond money was going to be spent for health and safety improvements, there was criteria set that was based on an equity. Not in there.
Paul's not gonna get it all there, but yeah.
Yeah, but it was designed for like what schools went first, and so I think Herman, that there could be a process by which we do so like where are the gaps, and then from an equity standpoint, how do you prioritize those? Because in the health and safety improvements, I think we did Title I schools first. TSI and CSI, you got to remind me because
Regarding which scope?
Jerry Vincent days. But there was here's the gaps, or here's the work that needs to be done, and then here's how we're going to prioritize them using an equity lens. So I think district staff, when we got resources, we got to realize until 2012 there hadn't been any bond money since 1995. So there was a process started, and I think that that's something that could be done again, and just as our sort of this, using that as the starting point, where are the gaps, and then how do you prioritize it using an equity lens, whether it's the whatever increment would be considered discretionary from the construction excise tax to next bond.
Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left. Go ahead, Amy.
Gary, I would be interested in, we get a quarterly update on where we are in terms of program and project contingency with the 2017 bond. So I would be interested in seeing a timeline that would help us understand when we can start having conversations about reprioritization. of some of those funds. As you know, project teams are reluctant to let go of any of the contingencies until they're really at the very, very end, because you just never know what might pop up. But we're getting close to the end. And so I guess with this kind of conversation in mind, I would be interested in getting a more realistic timeline about when we might be able to look at things from that point of view, and then also potentially how much money there is. And then you got to take it down a tier and look at, okay, of project money contingency money that may be left. What kind of project needs are there within each of the individual projects, or how much possibility is there to sweep that into program contingency to start, looking at completely new priorities like this, because it's not impossible. We're coming out with a balance in each of those projects. But for me, I need to see kind of the whole universe of needs and budgets.
Thank you. Any other questions before I mention something?
Sorry, maybe you don't want to focus on athletics, and we have the Roosevelt Grandstand proposal. I guess my question is the Roosevelt gym unfixable?
Well, anything's possible with money.
All things are
Right,
possible.
I mean, is there a, like, because as Herman was describing it, it sounded like there's hallway on one side and something else on the other side.
Classrooms, it would be a huge challenge, because you would have, you're moving classrooms where those kids going to go. That's the CTE space. And then you got to extend the building over. You got to do the driveway. The driving structure, all that. You got to.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
You got to.
it's a total rebuild. It's not a,
It's major.
It would be major.
it's not a renovation or an expansion.
You might be able to go taller on the bleachers a little bit, but that would trigger a smoke evacuation system to be installed on the roof of the gym. But I don't know how much you'd gain, probably not much.
So how about on the gym piece, I would love for us to at least look into how we can get to a place where majority of our kids can have access to that space outside of a full-on assembly. So I want to look at that. Our kids deserve it. This is the bottom line, and it's the taxpayer money. It's not our money. It's the taxpayers' money who is paying for this stuff. And I think they expect to have our kids have access to the spaces that we're all paying for. So for the gym piece, I would love to look at how we can get to a place where we can get to 17, 15, 16, 1,700 kids in that space.
And it would have to be from an athletic perspective, because I think, and Marshall this is where he can tell me, if we were just doing an assembly, everybody could fit, because we would be minimizing we were not necessarily using the gym floor for that mic, with the exception of like where we set up the chairs and the mic and the presenter. So we have to be specific, because we were not specific in the last go around, that what we're asking for is a larger use for athletic purposes. Because if you just say, I want to make sure that all the kids can use the bleachers and that they have the ability.
For every activity.
So, and that's what we have to just make sure that we're clear
not
on.
Just that, not athletics, but every activity.
Yep.
So that's just part of one of the access that they should have access to. Not
take it.
just athletic, but it's for any activity that happens in there, all of our kids have access to.
I'll take it.
Okay. And then as far as and so that's one thing I want to make sure we look into. I want to make sure I'm clear that we're going to be looking into how we can make the gym a place where the majority of our kids have access for all activities that happens in the gym. The second thing I want us to look at is, and looking through the lens of, capable of being capitalized on the grandstands for Roosevelt as well. I want us to look at, one, what would be a true cost for that. And two, how to look at the current funding, even with like the contingencies. And if that means if we need to expand the bond language or whatever, if we can use that through current bond funds or contingencies because we have a healthy contingency fund. When the last report we got is upwards of, when you add in Jefferson, is upwards of over $100 million in contingency funds. When you calculate the contingency fund for Jeff. So I just want to make sure that we are looking at that as far as from a capable of being capitalized viewpoint, and a cost estimate of what that looks like. And if, like I said, I'm looking at the language of using it from the current bond funds that we currently have. If all that is not going to be worked out, if we can't do it for some reason, it's $100 million to do, then we can always have the option of looking at the next bond to make that happen. But I want to start looking at that now so we can see where we're at and what we can do. Because we can always build, just like we build in contingency funds for Jeff, we can always build in another contingency fund for the next bond measure as well. But our kids, I think, deserve this now and not later.
Just there, when you say contingency funds for Jeff, so there are contingency funds within the Jefferson project that are specific.
Well, in the 2020
for
bond,
Jefferson.
well, there's 2020 bond, there was contingency
And there are
funds.
funds, yeah, for those 2020 bond scope of work.
Yeah. Gotcha. But anything that we don't spend goes into the general, so that's what I'm looking at, not,
Right.
The contingency
It's just
for-
trying to fast forward, it's.
yeah, so if
those
it's,
funds are there,
yeah.
they're a risk management tool.
I get it,
So
I get it,
reducing those funds now would of course increase risk for completing this.
I get it. But, when I look at our kids and what they deserve now, I think that outweighs the risk factor. Because if we harm kids now, then they're gonna take that a lot longer than the calculated risk that we could potentially take with the Jefferson project. So, or the 2020 bond. But I'm just like saying, let's just look at the numbers. Let's try to see what that looks like. Let's see where we can get those funds, from as far as, the contingency funds that we have from all the bond measures. And this start having that conversation. I just want to make sure we have direction on which way we need to go. So that way we're clear, on that. And then you let us know about how much time you think you need to do that, if it's at the next Facilities and Operations Committee or if it's, March. I just want to make sure we have a timeline of getting that information back.
Yeah, I think we can schedule that. We'll want to talk to some team members. We'll want to talk to legal bond counsel.
Awesome.
Can I ask about the tent?
The who?
The tent, the Roosevelt tent.
10.
The original tent?
For the gym tent?
Yeah.
That was up while it was being constructed, okay.
Uh-huh. So there was a tent that went up and they bought it with bond money with because they were looking to need somewhere for the kids to go to PE and do all this other stuff. And then when we bought it, it was said that it was bought with the Roosevelt bond money. And it was said that we're gonna use this tent in future builds and future places so that we don't have to, keep purchasing it and doing all that. And then, but I was told that it was sold, so we didn't do that. And then that's two things. If it was sold and we got money for it, did that money come back to Roosevelt because it was used with Roosevelt bond money? So did that money come back to Roosevelt to edify Roosevelt, or did it simply go into the general fund and get absorbed there? And if it didn't get sold, we haven't used it again. So
I think it was sold.
I know it was sold. I know it was sold. I know it was sold. I'm just throwing out because I want to leave room for someone else to come back and say, I knew it was sold. I know that we got close to $1 million for it. And so it was from the number that I told you, it was like 70 or something like that. So, and they could have been, maybe they were bolstering, but I know it was sold. I know we made money. The question becomes, did the money come back to the benefit and health and well-being of Roosevelt, since it was Roosevelt's bond money? Because a lot of what I'm seeing is, Roosevelt just gets shafted. And so we gotta call it, it is what it is. And we just keep doing this, and it's like this underhanded type stuff is happening, and I'm raising the skirt. I'm tipping over tables. It is what it is, and let's deal with it. And so, yeah, I kept my hands here.
Okay.
I also think, and just, maybe context is, if you talk to people in the Franklin neighborhood, they would say, I mean, that bond, the way it was constructed, it was very, very lean. So there were a lot of things, I think, for example, at the end, they ran out of money to pay for a particular, like, building treatment on the outside of the auditorium, like, so the community ended up, like, raising money to get the bond treatment, the building, materials that had been part of the DAG, and I know there were a whole host of things that got value engineered out. So I just want to say that there are a lot of people in the Franklin community who, because that first bond was, I think we've learned a lot with the modernizations, was very, very lean for all the schools that were part of that. And so I don't think it was, I mean, I think you'd find a lot of people in the Franklin community who would appreciate the position that Roosevelt's in, because of, they were in that same bond.
Well, I'm just curious if anybody at Franklin is got the gray trash cans set out in certain spaces, because when it rains too hard, they need somewhere to catch the rainwater.
Okay.
No, but they,
Okay. Y'all can talk about this on your own. Is there anything else pertaining to what we were talking about, the agenda at hand? Anybody else? All right, if not, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. I appreciate everyone for coming. Appreciate everybody, and have a great day. That's it. Yeah.